Well, hey everybody, my name is Kent, lead pastor here at Epic. So glad you guys are at church today. Everybody here at Parkside, do me a favor, help me welcome everybody who's watching from our other locations this morning. Come on. Roxborough, Fairmount, Center City, love you guys. So glad you're at church today as well. It's going to be a great time. All right, hey, last week we started this brand new series called Dream Job. And on your way out of our auditoriums last week, you should have gotten this little card that looks like this. And it's really cool. On one side, it says Dream Job. On the other side, it has the verse that we talked about that reminds us how we should approach the work that we do throughout the week. And one of the things I challenged you with was to take this card, to put it someplace in your workplace where you could see it, and then to take a picture of it, post it online using the hashtag #EpicDreamJob. No, DreamJobEpic. There you go. Hashtag DreamJobEpic. And post that on social media. And then I encourage everybody to go online, search that hashtag, and just encourage people. Like as you go throughout the week and you read this verse and you know, hey, this verse tells us how we should do our work, but it also tells us who we're actually doing our work for. And we said, hey, post that online, and then as you see other people posting that, make sure you like their photo. Make sure you make a little comment here and there. So many of you did this. It was so much fun. I had a ton of fun just going through all the different pictures. In fact, I thought, you know what, gosh, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I'm just going to take a minute as we kind of kick off today. I just want to go through some of my favorites. So let's check these out. Look at this. Here's one. I don't know how I got to Colorado Springs, but all the way to Colorado. And not only that, at the Olympic Training Center, so somebody in our church is about to do some big things. That's exciting. That's pretty cool. Here's another one. We got this is a nurse, I believe, so that was pretty cool. It's good to know nurses are doing what they do the best they can. A hairstylist, I thought that was neat. Here's another one. Come on. Some type of architect. So that is beyond me. I do not understand all that craziness. I like this one. It says, "I'm here for cake." So I don't really know exactly what they do. I think they actually make cake. I think that's what this is. And I was like, man, I like that person. This is actually a homeschooler, and I thought this was really cool. They said, you know what, my job is school right now, and so I'm just going to give my best. Actually, this might be a homeschool parent who's teaching their kids, so maybe it's give their best in that regard. So that's a huge thing. What's next? This is really neat. If you look, it's kind of blurry in the background, like they focused on the verse here, but they got their kids and they got the dog just kind of chilling back there. And listen, is that not a full-time job? That is a full-time job, right? Man, going at it. I loved that. I thought that was really cool. I was inspired by that. What's the next one? This is a fun one. This is from a friend of mine. She texted me. Here's what she said. And notice the great placement of the pin, Epic Church pin right there. Is your house flooded with Epic Church pins like mine is? It's awesome. It's good. Isn't that good to know? It's a perk. All right. So she texted me, and she says she posted this online, and like 3 of her friends text her and be like, did you get a new job? Like, are you quitting? Are you moving on? Like, what's going on? So she's like, no, I'm not. Just new perspective. Here we go. So what's the next one? This is really cool. Here's the actual card, but they were like, I really needed a good reminder, so they made their own huge one. Like, look at that thing. It is massive. Seriously, this is the card. They made that thing. So, impressive. I was really impressed when I saw that. So, let me see another one. Oh, I thought this was really cool. This is really neat. Now, listen, my favorite part about this photo wasn't necessarily as cute as the photo is. My favorite part about this photo was a hashtag that they included off to the side of their photo. And here's the hashtag, because remember, the verse reminds us how we should do our work, and that is to do it how? With all of our heart, right? And it reminds us who we're working for, right? Do your work for God. And here's what the hashtag they use. They said, hashtag raising her for him. Raising her for him. And my heart just went, you got me. Like, you got me. I am a sucker. You got me. All right, that's it. So let me tell you real quick. Let me tell you what I love about this. I love that last week, over 1,000 of us went into our work week with a different perspective and with a different purpose for our work. I love that last week, well over 1,000 of us walked into Monday morning knowing that we were created by God to do great work and nothing less. So we weren't going to settle for mediocre because we were created to do great work. I love that last week, a bunch of us walked into Monday knowing that ultimately God is the one that we're working for. And so because of that, we're going to do our work with all of our heart, right? I love that last week we realized that the most important thing that you and I can bring to our work, over 1,000 of us walked into Monday morning knowing that the most important thing we can bring to our work is our what? Our energy. There you go. One person remembers, Lord Jesus, help us. Is our energy, right? I love that. And I love it because what good is everything that we do here on a Sunday morning if it doesn't make a difference on your Monday or your Tuesday or your Wednesday? Man, what happens here on Sunday should change us and move us and help make us into the person that God always dreamed for us to be. And so I just want to take a moment. I'm looking through all those photos, and man, my heart just started to swell. And I thought, gosh, man, thank you for taking this seriously. Thank you for not showing up on a Sunday and just checking a box and saying, oh, I did my duty. Because it's not about doing a duty. It's about showing up to meet with God and allowing him to go to work in your life. Thank you for letting God roll up his sleeves, go to work in your life, and help make and shape you into the person he always dreamed for you to be. Way to go. That's awesome. Come on, let's give all of our churches a big round of applause for that. That is awesome. All right, so today, listen, work is a big part of our lives, is it not? Huge part of our lives. What we learned last week is that we spend half of the hours that we're awake at work, on the job, pursuing our careers. Half the hours you're awake, you spend them at work. And we also learned this terrible statistic last week, and that is that according to certain studies, we've discovered that 80% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs. 80% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs. So that means that 80% of us will spend half the time that we're awake doing something we're deeply dissatisfied with. That's crazy. And the question of this series has been, is that okay? Is this just one of those things where it just kind of is what it is and you deal with it? Are we okay with that? Are you okay with that? Here's another question. Is God okay with that? And not that he's disappointed in us because we're dissatisfied with our work, but that God would be disappointed for us. That we'd spend half our hours awake doing something that we're deeply dissatisfied with. God's good. He's your heavenly Father. He wants good things for you. He wouldn't want you to spend half your time doing something that does nothing but bring dissatisfaction. No, there's great purpose and meaning that can be found in the work that we do. Sometimes what it takes is a shift in perspective. Sometimes what it takes is a shift in our purpose. Sometimes it does take a shift in job, but we'll get to that here a little bit later. For most of us, this means that we see that there's actually this huge gap between our day job and our dream job. This huge gap. And so the question we're asking is, what do we do, right? Should we all just walk into work tomorrow and be like, I quit? No, not if you want to eat, right? You better keep your job so you can eat. Don't come to my house. I ain't feeding you. I got enough people to feed. You serious? My goodness, right? I'm just saying, right? What do we do? And so we're working real hard in this series to try and shrink that gap. Last week, we talked about a real important part of that equation. We talked about perspective. We talked about purpose. And if you missed it, listen, you need to go back and listen to the message from last week, okay? And listen, that's available for as long as there's an internet, that's available for you to watch. In fact, here's the website. It's epic.church/watch. Epic.church/watch. And you can go there and watch. Now listen, if you want to stay dissatisfied at work, don't listen to this. But if you want some life to be breathed into you as it relates to the work that you do and how you see it and how you attack it, then man, you need to go listen to the message from last week, all right? So make sure you do that. Now, my favorite thought from last week, really it's one of the foundational thoughts for this entire series, is this one idea. You and I were created by God with the desire and capacity to do great work. I love that. You and I were created by God with the desire and capacity to do great work, not mediocre work, not so-so work, not work, but great work. And last week, we spent a lot of time talking about how what it is that you do really isn't the big deal. In fact, what matters most is how you do whatever it is that you do and who you ultimately are doing it for. In fact, Paul said it this way. He says, whatever you do. It's should I do this or do that? Paul's like, whatever. Like whatever you do, just make sure you do it with all your heart and make sure you do it for God. That's what he said. No, so we said, hey, what you do isn't a big deal. And listen, if you're just able to grab onto that one thought from last week, that how you do what you do and who you ultimately do it for really is the thing that matters most, man, that is a game changer. Huge shift in perspective. That changes everything. But I wanted to take a few minutes this week and actually talk about the what. I really want to take some time to really talk about what it is that you do. Because what you do, even though it's not the most important thing, it's still a pretty big deal. And here's why. And you can quote me on this. This is a good one. You ready? The wrong what will kick your butt. It's in the Bible. Kinda. The wrong what will kick your butt. Listen, you spend half your waking hours at work. And if you spend half your waking hours doing the wrong work, doing the wrong what, I'm telling you, it's going to kick your butt. You're going to walk away every day just spent, done, finished. Why am I doing this? You know what I'm saying? There does need to be some alignment in what it is that you do and who it is that God created you to be. Now listen, I don't know about you, but I'm a sucker for any of the singing shows. You know what I'm talking about? Like The Voice, love The Voice. I'm a fan of The Voice. I'm a longtime fan of American Idol. I was sad when they took American Idol off TV, and I was glad the day I found out that this year it's coming back, baby. I can't wait. Gonna see American Idol 2018, right? The judges for this new season are Lionel Richie, Katy Perry, and then some country guy. I don't know who he is, but right, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. I can't wait to watch it. Now, I've watched every single season of American Idol, and I'm a little ashamed to admit it, but it's true. Every single season I've watched of American Idol. And to me, the best parts of that show are the first 3 weeks and the last 3 weeks, all right? The last 3 weeks, because man, the last 3 weeks, every performance is just, right? Like every performance is off the chain. Every performance is just huge. I love the last 3 weeks. I love the first 3 weeks because, come on, let's face it, there's always the chance of another William Hung. Come on. You know what I'm talking about? She bangs, right? That guy? You know what I'm talking about? Absolutely. Those first 3 weeks, it feels like every other contestant is a train wreck. You can't look away. You're like, oh my goodness. Who lied to them? Like their mama told them they could sing. Their mama lied. Why would they do that to them? This is not okay. And what's crazy about those first 3 weeks is that every single one of those contestants truly believe that they could be the next American Idol, right? I mean, they really believe it. And what's fun is you're watching the show and all of a sudden they start singing and instantly you know, oh no. No, my friend, you got the wrong what is what you got, right? You've given yourself to the wrong thing. This is not your deal. This is not the thing that you should pursue. I don't know who lied to you. I'm sorry, but you got to go because this ain't it. I'm just saying you should move on, right? And here's what's cool. It doesn't matter how passionate that person is about being the next American Idol, right? And they get mad, right? Don't they get mad? They're like, I have a cold. I'm like, listen, there's no cold on earth that could do that to anybody's voice. So don't blame the cold. That's not a cold. I'm just saying that you just can't sing. So it doesn't matter how passionate a person is about being the next American Idol. There's something else that you have to have that can determine your what, that thing you're created to do. Anybody want to venture to guess this morning? Come on, let me hear you. Oh, you're scared. It's okay. You could be scared. Ability, gift. There you go. Gifting or ability, or at least for our purposes, potential ability. Potential ability. Listen, this is huge for today. Look, we find clues about what we should do with our lives at the intersection of our unique passions and abilities. Did you hear that? We find clues about what we should do with our lives at the intersections of our unique passions and abilities. Remember what we said, the foundational thought for this series? You and I were created by God with a desire and capacity to do what? Great work. To do great work. Listen, if you have passion for something, but you have no ability to do it, or you don't have the ability to be able to learn how to do it, it doesn't matter how passionate you are, that's not your what. That is not your what. And here's why. It's because you don't have what it takes to do that in a great way. And you were created to do great work. The other side of that coin is true as well. If you have the ability to do something, right, or the ability to learn something, but you have no passion to do it, that's not your what either. That's not your what. Why? Because you won't have what it takes to do that in a great way. Because you were created to do great work. This is the reason why some people can hit 27, 28, 29, 30 years old, sometimes even older, and just wake up one day and think to themselves, I don't even think I like doing this. And it's because they don't have, or rather, they never had a passion to do that in the first place. They just did it because that's what their dad did. They just did it because that was the career path that they thought would pay the most money. They just did it because of whatever reason, but it wasn't because that's what they were passionate about, right? Or they find themselves not just, even if they do have a passion for a field, they find themselves in a job or in a role where they're just not equipped to be able to do it. They just don't have the ability to do that job well. They're just not created to be able to do that in a good way. And so because of that, they feel like they never win. They feel like everything's more difficult than it should be, right? And they just can't seem to find their stride as it relates to the work that they do. And listen, when that's the case, if you've ever been there, you just know way down deep on the inside of you, something's not right. And what happens in that moment is that person either decides just to give up and keep doing what they're doing, and the gap between their dream job and their day job gets further and further and further away. Grows and grows and grows. Or you finally come to your senses and decide, you know what? I'm going to do something about it. Listen, if that's where you're at this morning, if you feel like you're stuck doing the wrong what, like the wrong what, I just want to give you some stuff this morning that might be a little helpful, right? And so what do? How do you discover the work, the right what, the right work that God would have you do or spend your life doing? I think that whenever you're trying to determine God's plans for your career path and the type of work that you do, I think this is huge, and this is really big for us today, okay? This one thought, this is a really important thing. I think one of the most important things that you and I can do is take time to evaluate your unique passions and your unique abilities, hands down. The most important thing that you can do is just take the time to stop and evaluate your unique passions and your unique ability. Like I said, this thought, this idea that you have unique passions and you have unique abilities, this is huge for us. This is huge in figuring out the direction that you should move as it relates to the work that you do, all right? So let's talk about those two things. Let's talk about your passions, okay? When I talk about your passions, here's what I mean by that. What fires you up? Like, what is it that excites you? What gets you excited? Look what Psalm 37 verse 4 says. It says this, take delight in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Now, what this verse says is that as you follow God and as you keep him first in your life, it says that God will give you the desires of your heart. This doesn't mean that God, like some type of a genie in a bottle, will grant all your wishes. That's not what this is talking about. What this is saying is that as you follow him and as you live your life for God, that God will begin to place desires on the inside of you. And so here's one thing that you can consider as you're thinking about your passions. As you followed God, have you noticed that there's some desires for certain things that have started to pop up? Some things that are important to you now that maybe weren't important to you in the past? That's not an accident. God placed that in you. God put that in there. He gives us the desires of our heart, right? And so what are the things, what are the passions, what are the desires that are rattling around in your heart these days? What are those things? Think about that. What could those things be? Here's another way to try and determine what your passions are. What kind of work can you do that whenever you're done, you're tired because it was work, but you just kind of feel kind of filled up because of what you just got to do. You know what I'm talking about? You ever work all day, but at the end you're like, oh, that was great. Like, you know, you're tired, but you loved it, right? You just loved it, right? That can point to something that you're passionate about. Here's another question you could ask. If money wasn't an issue, what kind of work do you wish you could spend the best part or the best hours of your day doing? If money wasn't an issue, what kind of work do you wish you could spend the best hours of your day doing? Think about that, because those are your passions. Those are the things you're passionate about. Those are the desires that are rattling around on the inside of you. Those are your passions. Think about that. Let's talk about your abilities, all right? Because it takes passion, but it also takes your abilities. What is it that you're able to do that just kind of comes easier for you than it does for other people? You know what I'm talking about? There's just some things that just come easier for you than it does for other people. What are those things? Those point to what some of your abilities may be, right? What are the things that you just kind of have a knack for? Right? You just kind of have, it just kind of comes natural. It's like, I can do that, right? What are the things you have a knack for? What are the things that other people always say about you that when they walk up to you, they're like, wow, man, you're really good at that. What are those things that people say about you? Listen, that's not by accident. That's by design. Those are your natural gifts. Those are your natural abilities. And it's God who gave those to you. Look what the scripture says in Psalm 139. It says this: for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Here's what he says. He says, you didn't just create my outside. He says, no, before I was even born, you created who I am on the inside, he says. The thing that makes me, me, the thing that makes you, you, God created that before you were even born. Like he gave you natural gifts and abilities. Verse 14. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Now, I read that the first time, and I was like, that's a little arrogant. I mean, think about that. It's like God, listen, you made me. Good job. Right? In that little bit, it's like, oh, man, wow, you're a little full of yourself. He's like, God, you made me. You're wonderful. I know that full well. Look at me, right? But that's not what he's saying here. What he's saying here is like, listen, the intricacies of a human being, of creating a person and everything that's involved with that is just so unfathomable. It's so otherworldly. It's so divine that it's just like, God, you're incredible, right? Very true. He goes on, verse 15. Says, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, talking about the womb, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. And look what he says in verse 16. He says, your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Now, this is fascinating because you know what this means? In other words, he's saying this. He's saying, before my body was made in the womb, you knew the number of my days. You knew what I'd experience. You knew what I would go through. You knew the plans that you had for my life. And so when you created me with all of that in mind. Did you know that? When God created you in the womb, he did so with your whole life in view. And so you have specific gifts and specific natural abilities, and you're designed that way. Now, here's something that's really interesting, really fascinating. If you're a follower of Jesus, the Bible actually talks about a second set of gifts. And this is fascinating. They're called spiritual gifts. Anybody ever heard of spiritual gifts? The Apostle Paul talks about this. He writes about it in Ephesians chapter 4, in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and Romans chapter 12. And what's interesting is that in all these three different places, every single time he talks about these spiritual gifts, he gives a completely different list. It's like a whole nother list of spiritual gifts, of different gifts. And it's as if he's saying, listen, there's all kinds of spiritual gifts. I'm not even going to try to list every single one every single time. I'm just going to write a bunch of them that come to mind at the moment right now. And then he says this over in Romans chapter 12. He says, verse 6, he says, we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. Paul says, look, here's what I know. Whenever you decide to follow Jesus, God is going to give each of you spiritual gifts. And there's a bunch of different ones. For some of you, it might be the spiritual gift of encouragement. or the gift of giving, or the gift of leadership, or the gift of teaching, or the gift of serving, or the gift of showing mercy. I don't get that one. I don't have that gift. No one ever gave me that gift. When they were passing that out, I didn't get it. Paul says, I don't know exactly what your gifts are going to be, but I do know that the combination of your natural gifts and your spiritual gifts are going to be unique to you. They will uniquely make you. So, you take all that. You take your passions, you take your desires, you take your abilities, which are made up of your natural gifts and your spiritual gifts. You combine that with your life experience, what you've walked through in the past, and you can start to get a pretty good picture of maybe what God might have created and placed you on this earth to do with your life. Did you know that? But you got to put in the work of knowing your passions, knowing your abilities, your natural and spiritual gifts, looking back at your past and seeing what God has brought you through that uniquely positions you to know some things or to be able to speak to some things. And you can get a pretty good idea of what it is that God created you, the what he made you to do, right? So I don't know if you know this, but all those things, your passions, your abilities, your unique experiences, all of those things, they're God's unique thumbprint on you. Do you know that? Here's what's interesting about that. God's unique thumbprints on your life are clues about his unique plans for your life. God's unique thumbprints on your life are clues to God's unique plans for your life. Here's the thing. Some of you have no idea what you're passionate about. You have no idea. And it's not because you don't have any passions. And it's not because God hasn't given you any passions. It's because you've never taken the time just to think about it. Some of you have no idea what your natural or spiritual gifts are. Like if I walked up to you and said, hey, what are your top 5 gifts? You'd have no clue. You're like, I don't know. You have no idea. And it's not because you don't have any gifts. And it's not because God hasn't given you any gifts. It's because you've just never taken the time to think about it. In fact, most of us have spent more time in a season of our favorite show on Netflix than we have spent time trying to figure this stuff out. And gang, I'm telling you, at the end of the day, when we stand before God, he's not going to ask you about your favorite season on Netflix. He's going to ask you what you did with all those passions and all those desires and all those gifts, spiritual and natural, and all that life experience that God put you and walked you through and gave you. What'd you do with all that? That's what he's going to ask you. Nothing about Netflix. So what'd you do with what I gave you? Listen, I got some really, 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 really good news for you. Let's put it on the screen. You were created by God with a desire and capacity to do great work. You were created on purpose and for a purpose. And you've been uniquely gifted for those purposes. Good news. I've also got some really challenging news for you. You were created by God with a desire and capacity to do great work. You were created on purpose and for a purpose. And you've been uniquely gifted for those purposes. And you're accountable for what you do with what God has given you. You're accountable for what you do with what God has given you. In fact, this is such a big deal that I want to show you what Paul said to a young man that he was mentoring. This guy's name is Timothy. And Paul sees this young leader, and he sees gifts inside of him, just like God sees gifts inside of you. And he sees passion inside of him, just like God sees passion inside of you, right? Here's what Paul, this great mentor, says to this young leader named Timothy. It's 1 Timothy chapter 4, starting in verse number 14. Paul says this. He says, Timothy, do not neglect your gift. Now listen, this wasn't, hey, Timothy, listen, if you think about it, maybe if you get around to it later, if you got a little extra time, don't neglect your gift. If you could, maybe, please, possibly, sometime. Okay. No, Paul was passionate about this. Paul was all up in his grill. Paul was like, Timothy, listen. Paul pulled him close. He's like, Timothy, listen, do not neglect your gift. He says, you have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to hear what I'm trying to tell you right now. And the reason why I think Paul was so passionate about this is because this is a thing that we see all throughout the scripture. Over and over again, we see this. Jesus talked about this. In fact, one time, Jesus told this story about an owner who gave 3 different employees different amounts of money, and then the owner left. When the owner came back, each of those employees were held accountable for what they did with the money while the owner was gone. And 2 of them doubled the money, and he said, well done, faithful servants. And one of them took the money and hid it in the ground. And he gave the owner back what he had been given in the first place. He did nothing with it. He just kind of kept it from disappearing. And the story, Jesus says that the owner said, you wicked servant. It's like, oh, man. And it's because he's trying to make the point that, hey, we're stewards of what's been given to us. We have to do something with it. We don't hide it. We don't put it away. We don't go bury it in the ground. No, we got to make more with it than what we were given in the first place. We're stewards of what we've been given. And what happens sometimes, I think, just like in that story that Jesus told, I think sometimes we look at what everybody else got, and we're like, oh, well, they're just so talented. Like, they got all kinds of gifts. Like, they just, look at that. He can sing. Look at that. He can do this. She can do that. I look at my talents, and I'm like, wonk, wonk. You know? It's like, I'll just let the talented person run out there and be all talented. I'll just kind of do my own thing. Listen, at the end of the day, God's not going to hold you accountable for their talents. God's going to hold you accountable for what he gave you. So what'd you do with it? Stop playing the comparison game. God isn't comparing. He's looking at you and what he gave you. So what are you going to do with what he gave you? Right? This is important. This is huge. He goes on, Paul speaking to Timothy, he says, hey, don't neglect your gift, which is given to you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you. Now, let me tell you what this might look like in our world. This is whenever someone walks up to you and says, look, I just got to tell you, you're really good at that. Like when someone recognizes a gift in you, when someone recognizes a thumbprint on you, wow, you're really good. I wish I could do that the way that you do that. You're really good at leading. You're really good at creating an atmosphere that makes sure that everybody feels welcome and taken care of. Man, you're really good at listening. You're really good at just talking to people. You're really good at being generous. You're so giving. Wow. Man, you're really good at just explaining things. You're just so good at that. What happens, what our tendency is whenever someone comes up to us and says, hey, recognizes a gift possibly in our life, our tendency is to look back and be like, oh, no, it's no big deal. Right? Isn't that what we do? And we're trying to be humble, and nothing wrong with being humble. But listen, don't discount when someone sees a gift in you, because it is a big deal. Like God put that in you. And so maybe you and I, instead of saying, oh, it's no big deal, and discounting it and kind of pushing it aside, maybe what we should do is just say thank you. And then think about how we can best leverage or best use that gift going forward. Like, wow, God created me to be able to do that. I'm going to do even more of it. I'm going to develop it, right? He continues, verse 15, he says this. He says, be diligent in these matters. I love this. He says, as it relates to your gift, when it comes to your gift, he says, I want you to be particular. I want you to be meticulous. I want you to be rigorous. I want you to be so focused on it. Don't leave it to chance. I want you to do everything you can to discover it, and then I want you to do everything you can to develop it. In fact, that's exactly what he says. He says, give yourselves wholly to them. He says, don't hold anything back. Not one bit. Give yourself wholly to it. And then look at these 3 words. So that everyone may see your progress. You know what he's getting at here? Here's what he's saying. Here's what Paul's saying to Timothy. He said, listen, God's gifted you. God's gifted you, and that matters. That's a big deal. You need to discover what those gifts are, and you need to do everything you can to develop them, right? And here's what he's saying. When he says, so that everyone, here's what he's saying. He said, if you won't do that for yourself, at the very least, be willing to do that for the rest of us. Because what this world needs is a world that's full of people who understand what they were created to do and then are willing to actually do it. What the people at your work need is someone who understands what they were created to do and then is willing to do it. What the people in your neighborhood need is somebody who understands what they were created and gifted to do and then is actually willing to do it. What the people in this church need is someone who understands what they were created to do and then someone who's willing to actually do it. What the people in this city need is a bunch of us to realize what we were created to do and then be willing to actually do it. So if you won't do it for you, then at the very least, do it for the rest of us. Because this thing, this gift that you've been given by God, it's bigger than just you. It wasn't given to you for just you. It was given to you for everybody around you. Don't you see how this works together? In fact, Paul writes this in 1 Timothy, and then he writes him another letter in 2 Timothy, and it's almost like Paul thinks to himself, I don't know if I was strong enough. And so look what he says in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse number 6. He says, for this reason, I remind you, and here's what he says. He says, fan into flame the gift of God. He uses this incredible word picture where he's saying, listen, don't be content with just the pilot light of a gift that God has given you. No, he says, once you discover it, I want you to do everything you can to develop it. I want you to do everything you can to feed it so that it'll grow into something that will really make a difference. He says, listen, you can't keep it to yourself. If you want to, you can. You can keep your little pilot light to yourself, but I'm telling you, it's going to bring no warmth and no light to anyone else. And that's not why you were given that gift, right? You can keep it to yourself, or you can get after it, and you can fan that gift into flame and see what God does as a result. Paul says, Timothy, don't neglect your gifts. Be diligent with your gifts. Discover and develop your gifts. Do everything you can to feed them. Fan it into flame. He says, listen, do you hear what I'm saying, Timothy? You've been gifted by God. You've been given natural gifts. You've been given spiritual gifts. Don't waste it. Leverage it. Use it. Develop it. Do you hear what I'm saying? You hear what I'm saying, Timothy? Do you hear what I'm saying, Tom or Teresa or Courtney or Chris? Joe, Aaron, Andy, Carson, Kathy, Coop, do you hear what I'm saying? Kate, Michelle, Scott, Jennifer, James, do you hear what I'm trying to say to you? You've been gifted by God. Don't waste your gift. Be diligent with your gifts. Don't neglect it, right? Listen. He says, I'm counting on you, Timothy. We're counting on you, Joe. God's counting on you, Bill. There's too much riding on this for you to just let it slip by. There's too much that's going to go undone if you don't figure this out. You've got a job to do. You've got great work to accomplish. You've got a workplace to impact. You've got people to serve. We've got a city to reach. We've got a mission to fulfill. We've got a difference to make. Don't stop now. We're just getting started. You were created with a desire and capacity to do great work. So get it done. You were created on purpose and for a purpose. So get it done. You've been uniquely gifted by God for those purposes. So I'm telling you, come on. Get it done. So if you feel like you're stuck in the wrong what, at least take the time to evaluate your passions and your abilities and then do something about it. Here's what I want you to do in 3 phrases. Know your passions, know your ability, know your gifts, get it done. Know your passions, know your gifts, get it done, right? Now listen, we want to help you do this. And so for the next couple minutes, we're going to get painfully pragmatic, like painfully. For those of you who are like, it's like, so really what should I do? Right? You're like, thank you, finally. Painfully pragmatic. We want to help you. And so here's what we did, all right? When it comes to knowing your passions, here's this thing you can do. It's called a passion bracket. This is fascinating, all right? It's a lot of fun. Here's what you do. You can draw this out yourself, all right? 8 lines. You write down 8 things that you're most passionate about. What are you most passionate about? Write down 8 of them. And then what you do is you ask yourself this question. Of these first 2, which one am I most passionate about? Which one wins? Whichever one wins moves on to the next round. Okay? You do the same thing here, moves on to the next round. Same thing here and the same thing here. And then you ask yourself the question, of these 2 things, which one am I most passionate about? Which one wins? And moves on to the next round. And then you ask yourself the final question, of these 2 things, which one wins? And by the end of it, you should have what you're most passionate about. That's one way for you to be able to do that. It's called a passion bracket. I encourage you to do that. That's one thing you can do, all right? We want you to know your passions. We also want you to know your gifts, okay? So here's a couple things you can do. Here's the first one. This is free. This is great. This week, I want you to email 7 people and ask them, what do you think I'm good at? As you look at my life, what do you think my strengths are? What's cool is when you do this, you're going to find out some really interesting information, right? Some of it's going to be really encouraging. You're going to be like, oh. Some of you are going to be like, I knew that. Others, you're going to be like, really? You think I'm good at that? It's going to be awesome. Some of you are going to be like, how come they didn't say anything about how smart I am? Like, what's that about? And you're going to find some stuff that's maybe not encouraging, but it's a reality check, right? And that's okay, right? It's the truth. Ask people, what do you think I'm good at, okay? That's one thing you can do to help discover or find out some of your gifts. Here's the second thing you can do. We actually have created, or actually, we've provided a tool to help you discover what your spiritual gifts are. Because some of you are like, I have no idea. I have no clue. Like, what in the world? So there's this thing called a spiritual gifts assessment that we've created, or that we've placed online for you to be able to use. And here's where it's at. It's at Epic. No, let's go back. It's at epic.church/my-gifts. Epic.church/my-gifts. And if you'll go there, you put in your email and your name, you'll be able to take the assessment, and then you'll get emailed. This is what's really cool. You'll get emailed your results, all right? And then you'll get your whole kind of where you rank about what your top spiritual gifts are. And then with each one of those gifts, you'll actually get a little document where you can read about it, right? And so this one is about the spiritual gift of encouragement, right? So there's a definition for that. There's a bunch of scriptures about it. There's gifts in action. It talks about people in scripture who used it. Tells you what people with this gift are like. Tells you characteristics of these people and potential ways for you to use the gift of encouragement. So you could do the research. You can read for yourself. It's a really cool thing for you to be able to check out. So I'm going to encourage you to do that, okay? So we've given you tools. We've given you stuff. Hey, we don't want to just rah and you leave and you be like, yeah, what are you going to do? I don't know. No, we've given you stuff to do, but here's my hunch. Most of us won't do this. You know why? We're busy. And this, to us, it's important, but it's not urgent. It's like, But Paul would beg to differ. Paul would say, hey, you, whatever your name is, don't neglect your gift. Don't do it. Don't neglect your gift, right? Listen, if you're doing a job and you're dissatisfied with it, but you won't take the time to evaluate your passions and your abilities, I don't think you have any right to complain about your job, right? Whenever I get sick, I don't know about, you see, ladies, you don't understand this, but when men get sick, we get sick, like real sick. And so when I'm sick, I'll tell Tiffany, I'm like, babe, I'm sick, and my wife will say, hon, you need to go to the doctor. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And she's like, no, you need to go to the doctor. Like, we've given you everything we give you. You need to go to the doctor. I'm like, I'll wait it out. I'm good. I'm all right? And then later on, I will then complain about how sick I am. And she looks at me, and I know what she's thinking. She's thinking, don't complain to me about how sick you are. I told you what you need to do. And eventually I break down and I go to the doctor. You know what happens? I get better. It's amazing. If you won't take the time to figure out your passions and abilities, don't complain to me about your job. Come on, right? Here's the last one. Get it done. Get it done. Listen, today is about helping those who feel stuck at work, stuck with what it is that you're doing. All right, I hope it's helpful. I hope you walk away with some stuff to do and some things to shift, and that's an awesome thing. That you spend half your waking hours doing something that brings dissatisfaction, that's terrible. Come on, we can shift that maybe somehow. Let's at least think about it. Now listen, I don't know exactly what the right what is for you as it relates to your work. I have no idea. I don't even know if there is an exact right what. I don't even think that's the most important thing. I know there's a wrong what, and don't want you to do that, right? But here's what I do know. I do know that there is a right what for you as it relates to how you serve in the church. Listen to me. You were created by God to do great work at church. You were created by God to do great work at church, right? And listen, when you don't do it, when you're not serving on a team in some way, not only do you miss out because you miss being part of the miracle of what happens here on a Sunday morning, but we miss you being part of it too. Because the reality is that whenever you're not serving in some way, when you're not contributing, when you're not looking how you've been gifted and talented and you're contributing toward what God does through the church, if you're not giving your time, giving your resources, if you're not doing that, there's stuff that goes undone. I don't know if you realize that, but it's true. The reality is that we as a church move slower when you don't do your part. And we all, every single one of us, have a part to play. Every single one of us. Our church is not as good when you're not serving. Our teams are not as good when you're not serving. Our Sunday morning experience at all of our locations is not as good when you're not serving. You were created and designed by God to do great work at church. No more excuses. Every time our church has done something great, it's been because there's been a group of people that stepped up to do it. And so there should never be a day that there's not enough kids workers. This is the greatest work on the planet. There should never be a day that there's not enough people holding doors. See, this is so interesting. I don't know if you know this, but we're so committed to having a great worship experience that we won't let that suffer. Right? And so if we don't have a drummer, we'll go we'll contract someone to come in and play drums. They don't go to our church. We just go get them to go play drums because we want to have a great experience for everybody. I wonder if the reason why sometimes we have to go hire a drummer from outside to come play is because somebody inside neglected their gift. Right? I wonder if there's leaders not leading because somebody inside is neglecting their gift. I wonder if there's great work that could be done that isn't getting done because people inside are neglecting their gift. Look at me. We are uniquely positioned as a church to make a difference in this city like no other. You look around, look how diverse we are. Look how special that is. Look how young we are. You know how special that is? You know how unique that is? You know the difference this kind of a place could make in the lives of so many other people in the city who would walk into other places and instantly feel out of place? Do you realize what we have? You realize what we're stewarding? Every single one of us have a part to play in that. So do not leave your part undone. Do not neglect the gift that God has given you. Don't go one more Sunday in this church without being part of it. Don't go one more Sunday in this church without saying, you know what, me too. I'm stacking hands. I want to create a place where people who are far from God can come and discover they don't have to be. I want to create a place that like this has made such a difference in my heart and in my life for other people just like this. I want to be part of doing that. I'm not going to leave my part undone. Do not neglect the gift in you. There's too much at stake for you to do that. And so hear me. Where are you serving? Because you were created by God to do great work in his church. to make a difference in the lives of people in this city. We have a big vision, but it's going to take every single one of us to get there. Every single one. Don't leave it undone. Let's get it done. You hear me? Do you hear me? I love you guys. Let me pray for you. God, thank you that you meet us right where we're at. And Lord, my prayer today is you give us the wisdom to know what to do with what we hear and the courage to do it. I pray that every single one of us will leave this place challenged and encouraged in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys.